were to ask you, who is the smartest person you know? I'd get many different answers from each one of you. Some would go to the family and say, well, it's a grandfather or a grandmother. Maybe it's a father or a mother. Some of you may say, well, this teacher I have in school, or maybe a college professor that I came across, or maybe it's some celebrity. There's all different answers to this and how people gauge who is the smartest person that they know. But there's one whose intelligence, whose knowledge vastly is superior to any human being ever has been, ever will be. And of course, that's God. The closest human to this knowledge would have to be that of Solomon. Of course, Jesus would be definitely in the mix, but Jesus is God, so that gives him a little bit more of an advantage there. But Solomon, in all of his wisdom, his understanding, his knowledge came from God. God granted him that, and so he's the source. And if we ever wonder about that, there's a psalm that helps us to see this, the omniscience of God. Psalm 139 is the text that I want us to consider by way of meditation this Monday. I want us to focus on the first 6 verses today. Lord willing, next Monday we'll pick up in this same psalm again and note some more attributes of God. But today I want us to meditate on the omniscience of God, the fact that he is all-knowing. Looking at that word omniscience, omniscience is really how it's put together. And it's an interesting way of looking at this. Omni carries the idea of all, but there's that science. And if we know anything about science, and I'm talking true science, it's about testing and trying to come to an understanding of truth. But it's through testing, a series of testing. Now, God is different in this sense. He's not having to test us in those ways. He knows all things because he's God. But there is a series of testing that we see with him throughout the Scriptures. And let's consider that in the first 6 verses of Psalm 139. By way of meditating this morning on God's Word. Let's note the omniscience of God. Verse 1, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my downsitting and mine uprising. Thou understandest my thought afar off. Thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. I cannot attain unto it. Okay, let's think about this. The omniscience of God, all-knowing God. Now, sometimes it can be intimidating to be in the presence of someone who is highly intelligent. Well, we've allowed that to intimidate us at times, but is that the case with God? Well, maybe it is. But let's think about what he knows from this text again. He knows what we do, he knows what we think, and he knows what we say. Now let's break it. Let's go back and look at it again. The first verse he says, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Now, again, it's not so much that God is having to do some research on us and dig into who we are. He knows these things, and that's going to be seen as you continue. The idea is more behind God looks at us. God looks at our lives. God knows who we are. He knows what we're going through. He knows that I'm enjoying the beauty of this day. And I am. Its temperature is much better than it's been for some time. I still hear the insects as they're making a lot of noise around me, but that reminds me of summer in Mississippi, that sound. The cool breeze that I feel blowing through. It's just wonderful. The sky is perfectly blue and clear. He knows that. He knows that I'm enjoying this. Now, he knows other things about me as well. And so the point behind this again is that he's looking at us. You've searched me and you've known me. You've watched me from birth. And even before birth, he knew that I would be. And he knows me. The power of God's knowledge. But he knows what I do. Let's continue reading. He said, Thou knowest my downsitting and mine uprising. Thou understandest my thoughts afar off. You know my downsitting and my uprising. You know when I pillow my head at night. You know when I sit down and I'm not doing anything. You know when I'm doing many things. You know when I rise up in the morning and when I lie down at night. Those things, we can't hide those things from God. He is all-knowing. He knows what we do. Verse number 3 says, "Thou compassed," encircled and come around. You compassed my path. My path is, of course, the course of my life, the things that I'm doing again in my life. And He's compassed my path, my lying down, He says. "Thou art acquainted with all of my ways." The ways, again, denote the things that we do. Not just who we are, the things that we do. He knows those things, and He's encircled those things, and He's watching me. The psalmist is seeing God's presence with him, not in a negative way, that God is watching over him. Verse number 4, "There's not a word in my tongue, but lo, thou knowest it altogether." He knows. He's watching not only my doings, my actions. Go back to verse number 2 in the last phrase. "You understand my thoughts afar off." We try in our relationships, we try to understand one another, but we don't know what someone else is thinking unless they tell us. But God knows my thoughts, even from afar off. He may seem so far away, but the fact that He knows my thoughts reminds us of how close that He really is. He's but a prayer away. He knows our thoughts. He goes on and says that He knows what we say as well. Verse number 4 again, "There's not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether." There's not a word in my tongue, the King James Version said. Other translations have it a little bit differently. It's the idea of the word before it comes off my tongue, before the word's on my tongue, meaning the thought behind the word that's about to proceed. He knows that. He knows what we're about to say before we say it. Wow, the knowledge of God. Verse 5 again, He says, "Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me." Beset means to encircle again, to somewhat of the idea of besieging. He's surrounding us, our going forth and our going backwards. He knows from before us and behind us. And He's laid His hand upon us. His providence is with us. He's laid His hand upon us in His care for us. And then verse number 6, "Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain unto it." It's too wonderful for me. It's amazing. It's above and beyond my capabilities and yours. That's the knowledge of God. And so, by way of meditating on that text, go back and read it again slowly. Pick apart those words. Circle those words that stand out to you. Focus on those words that you can find comfort in today. If these words trouble you, now it can be a troubling thing to know that God knows my thoughts and He knows my actions, because sometimes my thoughts and my actions are against Him. But He already knows them. I may have hidden them from the world around me, but I can't hide them from Him. And the idea behind this is He wants to forgive us. He wants to cleanse us from those things. He wants to give us hope. Remember, His hand is upon us. Is it a hand of graciousness and forgiveness, or will it be a hand of suffering and punishment? The choice is ours right now as we meditate upon this all-knowing God, the omniscience of God. It's too wonderful for me to even process. I can never fathom having that much knowledge, but I can rest knowing the one who has that much knowledge loves me and wants me to be with Him. On that, I can meditate this Monday and every Monday. May God bless you till we meet again.